Greetings, fellow truth seekers. Welcome to Paranormal M, your portal to the mysterious and unexplained. Subscribe and turn on notifications to embark on a journey throughout the realms of the unknown. We promise to keep you on the edge of your seat with our latest perplexing, non-AI tales. Do you believe in Fae? About 2 years ago, we had some odd occurrences at our home. It was around late September, early October. That was as the leaves were changing color and you can really feel autumn in the air. If you live in the Midwest or live in a place that has seasonal changes, the fall air smells different. We were decorating for Halloween, so things got moved around a bit in the front lawn to make room for the decor. Didn't think much of anything until things started to go missing at home. A few weeks prior to decorating, I purchased a set of Bluetooth earbuds that I use on a daily basis. I carried them in my pocket when I went out. After decorating, I went out to the local Target to pick up some groceries and some additional string lights. Later that evening, when I got a call, I looked for my earbuds and I couldn't find them anywhere. I was a bit upset and chalked it up to maybe it fell out of my pocket at Target. The next day, I went back to Target just to make sure, retraced my steps and checked lost and found. Nothing. While grieving my loss, I bought another exact pair of Bezos, and 2 days later the package arrived at my doorstep and smiley tape and all. All is well again in our little world until a few days later when I was preparing our dinner. We wanted to do Korean barbecue at home. We have a tabletop Korean barbecue grill pan, one that you set on top of the butane stove. I looked in its usual spot, the corner kitchen cabinet, and for the love of all things tasty, I hated the corner cabinet. Yeah. That's where appliances and old pans are sent to live out their days in the dark, web-filled corners, and, well, rarely thought and really didn't visit it until we just so happened to be in the neighborhood. The grill pan wasn't there. Took everything out of the corner cabinet. Wasn't there. I even had my wife lend a pair of eyes. She went as far as crawling into the Dominion armed with her cell phone and flashlight to see if we can rescue the grill pan from the depths. But no luck, it was lost, forever in the darkness. As my wife resurfaced from the corner cabinet and I wrapped up reminiscing old times with my tamago pan and old fondue set, dinner was a bust that night. 2 items missing back to back. Could it be a coincidence? My wife and I spoke, and she mentioned that recently she saw a TikTok about Fae and how they can be mischievous. Of course, TikTok to the rescue. Being spiritual, this wouldn't be our first encounter with Fae, as my wife had made offerings to them in the past for her garden. But this made me think and turn to our all-knowing acquaintance, Google. Come to find out, moving things in the garden and in the yard can disturb their habitat, and even the places they reside. This can result in angering them. Understandable, I'd be pretty pissed if I came home from work and my house was moved a few blocks over too. So, new knowledge in hand, I went out into our front lawn and apologized out loud. I explained that we didn't mean to disturb them, that we were only there preparing for the holidays. I left out an offering of honey, bread, and milk. Now I wait. Then the next night I was upstairs wrapping up some work and my kiddo ran upstairs with a set of Bluetooth earbuds and handed them over while saying, "Here, Daddy." I said, "Thank yous." Didn't think anything of it, and when I set them down on my desk, I realized that my new pair of Bluetooth earbuds were already on my desk. I ran downstairs, asked my wife and kiddo if they'd found it. My kiddo responded, and they were sitting right there, right on the edge of the coffee table. Eyes wide, I explained it to my wife. Those were my missing pair of earbuds that I lost a little over a week ago. We were both speechless. As we cleared off the coffee table looking for earbuds, the night went missing. But later on that night, while my wife took a bath and I was preparing dinner, I decided to visit my friend in tamago pan. I contoured my way into the corner cabinet, phone in hand, pull out the pan, and guess what was sitting there? The Korean grill pan that was missing, only 24 hours earlier. We couldn't explain how both of the missing items just showed back up, but I told my wife that I'd apologized out loud the day before, took out an offering. Sometimes, just because we can't explain it, doesn't mean they do not exist. The Church and the Ouija Board. About 15 years ago, my old high school group decided we were going to attempt to contact my friend. My friend Ben's biological dad that had recently died before we got to know him. Now, Ben was absolutely wild. He wasn't scared easily. My high school sweetheart was with us, and he was absolutely terrified. I owned a Native American necklace that had items placed in it for protection from spirits. And to help ease his anxiety, I placed the necklace around his neck. He partook in the devil's lettuce, started our session giggling. Devil's lettuce. I was no longer a believer in, Ouija boards. It didn't bother me a bit that we decided to do this in an abandoned church deep in the woods either. Only my boyfriend was terrified, which caused our friends to kind of tease him mercilessly. The board was set up, and we got serious. We just had no idea how serious this was about to become. As the planchette moved to spell his father's name, I smiled, thinking this was his method of closure. He was clearly doing it because he had refused to share the name beforehand. But looking into his eyes, I saw something that I've never seen etched into his face. It was fear. Can't remember how it all went down, but suddenly the board was spinning and I said murder. I was startled. I felt cold, even in the heat. That's when it all went to shit. The pews, already broken, were shaking uncontrollably, even toppling over. We were in a back room that was essentially empty, but we ripped open the door to discover the pews toppling over. It started a massive panic to get out of the building. As I was running, I realized my boyfriend wasn't with us in the woods. I turned back right as Ben and a few others pulled off in their cars. Once I re-entered the dilapidated church, my boyfriend was stuck, literally stuck to the floor screaming. The building was still shaking, it was ice cold, and it felt like a sock had been shoved into my mouth. I remember my best friend helping me carry him out of the building. Within an instant, he had his wits about him, refused to talk about what happened. He looked like he'd just been through war. He opted to keep my protection necklace on, citing that the demon may follow one of us. Indeed, Gecko. We never really talked about what happened. It was very strange for my very open friend group. We knew it wasn't an earthquake because we lived just an hour below the Blue Ridge Mountains of Appalachia. Never get quakes that can move furniture. To be honest, I felt something dark around me until, like a cleansing 11 years later after the scariest haunting I've ever experienced happened. I don't know what we released or even have any clue how that could have been a natural event. Something threw those church pews to pieces. We never went back. My life was saved by a ghost. My boyfriend of 5 years has crushed on me for probably 12 or 13 years. He was 2 grades below me and was a bad boy. Well, I was popular and in all the honors college level classes, so I wasn't aware he existed until I met him at my dad's business about 7 years ago. He apparently talked about me being his dream girl and was teased that it would never happen. That's why I mentioned this. That's cute. So in 2009, he and my best friend, I'll call him Josh, were getting into pills due to Josh's grandfather being an amputee and unable to properly attend or understand hiding the medications, thus leaving large amounts of methadone, Klonopin, hydrocodone, and such lying around. This was before the opiate crisis that's affected my generation deeply in the last 15 years. 2 days before Christmas, 2009, Josh overdosed in the bedroom that my boyfriend's currently staying in. It's a long story, but we moved back to our respective families because we were laid off during the pandemic and we were in a bad wreck, losing the extra car. The room has never felt spooky, never anything strange about it, but I've had a few pranks pulled on me that we believe Josh does to basically congratulate my boyfriend on being with the woman he waited for. I've woken up to sticky notes completely covering my body. My drinks poured on the floor and random objects moved right where I'd exit the bed so I'd step on them first thing in the morning. I swear I've heard giggling. Each time I've angrily asked my boyfriend if he was messing with me, and I'm aware when he's lying, he always says no. We'd like to think that Josh is playing practical jokes, something that he was known for. But this is nothing compared to what Josh did for me in 2017. It wasn't a prank, it saved my life. 4 years ago I went into anaphylactic shock. I lost all ability to speak or move my lower body. I was upstairs with a curved and steep staircase separating me from my phone. I remember crawling to the stairs and knocking, and it could be fatal if I smashed into the wall and the stairs led to before the turn with the very large steep steps. I was extremely low on oxygen, and I immediately saw Josh and two of my deceased best friends ascend the stairs, carry me to the living room couch with my nebulizer and cell phone. I called 911, but I had no voice. My friends were gone except Josh. He told me he was going to wake my boyfriend from the hammock in the back of the yard, and suddenly my boyfriend dreamed of his friend saying that I was in trouble. My boyfriend came running to the house, and by this point I was dying. I no longer could use any part of my body, and no air came into my lungs when I inhaled. I remembered thinking of my daughter and praying that her father would navigate my loss for her, keep the memories of me alive. He actually died in a freak accident 8 months ago, so now I'm fulfilling that for him. But I digress. I struggled to remain conscious, but I was fading. My boyfriend saw the 911 operator on the phone and my sweaty blue body. I told him that he didn't think I was breathing, and by some absolute miracle there was an ambulance passing my neighborhood. The hospital and dispatch were 30 minutes away. This coincidence, plus my boyfriend's sudden premonition that I was hurt, saved my life. Josh and those EMT saved my life. I remember the EMT asking my boyfriend if I had overdosed. I hadn't, and I thought of how Josh had died. I was blabbering on about dead people saving me after a large amount of epinephrine, so no wonder they thought I was high. The doctors and EMT were baffled at how I managed to get down those stairs or even stay alive long enough to get help. I had one bruise on my leg that was tiny. That was it. The worst headache I ever had, though. Turns out I'm allergic to the latex and spray paint. I just told them that I slid down the stairs, but it's not how I remember it. Weird thing is, I never met Josh when he was alive. I don't know how I recognized him or hallucinated him, but he looked exactly like the picture I was shown. I've had a lot of paranormal encounters, but my run-in with Josh saved my life, and he never even knew me. The Scream in the Woods. Close to 10:30 p.m., me and my friends decide that we'll go to the playground. It was just our go-to hangout spot. We were talking for a while, and then all of a sudden I got chills and I heard a scream. It sounded like it came from the direction of the cave. I turned to my friend, and we'll call him A. I asked if he heard it as well. He said he had, but he didn't hear it well. My other friend, we'll call him R, told me that A was just probably, just somebody's car tires, not to worry. So now, slightly more on edge, we continued our conversations. About 15 minutes later, we all just stopped talking and got chills at the exact same time. A feeling of complete dread and blatant wrongness shot through all of us, really. R started walking towards the woods to get out. I yelled and I said that we needed to go the long way and stay in the light. We ran along the school building, and when we get close to the parking lot's up a hill adjacent to the playground next to the woods, we decided to stop running and take a breather. Again, we got the wrong feeling that something was wrong. Then all of a sudden, the crickets and tree frogs stopped chirping. Whatever it was screamed again. But this time it sounded like it was right next to the playground. All of us heard it and we agreed it didn't sound human or like any of the animals in the area. It made it feel like ice shot through your veins. I ran to my car and hopped in. I locked the doors as soon as I could. So I tried to start the car. Didn't start right away, I had to try twice. Never had this issue before. Once the car started and we drove away, the school zone light outside the parking lot started flashing red. We drove away and made it into town, and the lights in the courthouse went out. We were very spooked. Decided to just go to A's house. But I still don't know what it was that we heard. But it was definitely setting me on edge because the car and the lights acted weird. I think it manipulated them too. Whatever it was just wasn't good. Haunted Residence Hall. I just graduated college. I was an RA in our freshman residence hall for 3 years. My first 2 years I've lived on the 6th floor, but for my senior year I was moved to the 5th floor. Now our dorms are really nice in a fairly new building, and RAs are given essentially a decently sized studio apartment. Having been at the school for a few years and the building being newer, I'd known most of the RAs who'd ever lived in the room before, and on occasion had heard from them and the room was haunted by something. It was never very intense before, but weird things would happen, like knocks at the door late at night. The RA would open the door and there would be nobody anywhere in the hallway. Well, I now think that this may have been the spirit using this tried and true method to gain permission from every new RA to enter the room. Items would disappear and then reappear sometime later in different spots. Bathroom door would lock by itself, and sometimes cabinet doors would open. I'd never experienced it before moving into the room, but after I got settled, all this happened very frequently. Just like how my voice disappears. So later on, my friends and I would start to see shadows manifesting briefly as well. It wasn't fun to deal with on top of a stressful senior year, COVID and all. LOL. Here's some of the most interesting stuff that occurred, and things I found out during my senior year living in that room. I went to an art school. We had a lot of students battling depression and anxiety. There have been quite a few suicide attempts from residential students. Never any succeeding though. And after lots of asking, I discovered that all these attempts over the years had happened on the 5th floor. One of my residents who ended up dropping out a few months into school was having lots of problems with her roommates. One of the things they complained about was that, well, she insisted on practicing with a Ouija board on the right side of the room, not her side. I found out from previous residents and friends of the 5th floor room that this was the 3rd time in a row, this was over the course of 3 years, that the exact situation had happened. The girl's name was Alex. So were the other 2 girls' names before her trying to do the same thing, and they all dropped out months later. Still creepy to me. One word of this thing got around, and, well, more than it ever had before. The freshmen started referring to it as the Uptown Ghost. Her dorm's name was Uptown. Other RAs who used to be skeptics began to dread doing their duty rounds because they would hear footsteps right behind them. Lights would turn off, or they would hear whispering in the rooms that were vacant because of the holidays. So going to an art school, one of the freshmen actually drew the thing, hung it up in the hallway. And I regret to say I didn't snag a picture of it, but I was on a late night round and was already spooked, and when I saw the drawing I just cried and threw it in the trash. The scariest part though is that the drawing matched what my one friend, who's a self-identified sensitive, had described months prior. But I hadn't told anybody about it. A skinny, tall shadow with an unhinged jaw and unrealistic arms that dragged into the ground. How everything wrapped up was I reached out to a friend that I knew had very strong religious ties and beliefs. And the parents who turned out to be my saving grace. They didn't refer to themselves as such, but I essentially equate them to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Her mom claimed to be able to see spirits, and her father claimed to be able to hear the word of God. The experience of them cleansing my room was itself something I'll never forget, and for good reasons. They claimed there was a spiritual residue in my room from years of activity that had most likely collected near the ceiling. I hate thinking about that. They told me they cleansed my room and, more importantly, gave me the power to banish the spirit from my presence, which proved true as the second semester rolled out and everybody else continued to experience things, but I never did again. During the cleansing while my friend's mom was praying over me, her dad suddenly said, "There you are," toward the doorway, and told me to defend my living space as my own. Still gives me chills to this day. The new RA who lives in that room now, one of my old residents, still texts me to this day saying that after I moved out, the spirit moved right back into the 5th floor RA room. She experiences everything I did when I first lived there. Overall, I do kind of blame myself for giving the thing so much attention and therefore power throughout the months I lived there. But I also attribute its overwhelming activity and my presence to my spirituality or religious beliefs. I still don't know what exactly it was or how it got into such a new building, but it's always interesting to hear other people's opinions on it. And it feels good to know that in the end, I overcame it. Have you ever experienced a doll or a toy moving? I was about 6 or 7, and the year was 2000. Me and my older sister slept in my parents' room in a small bed that belonged to a younger brother. He was sleeping in the middle of my parents. I can't remember why we didn't sleep in our own room that night, but I think we were scared of the dark, like most children. Our bedroom was about 2 feet from our parents', and it was directly across from their room. We lived in one of those apartments with the kitchen and living room on the 1st floor and the bedrooms and bathroom on the 2nd floor. So my parents' bed is to the left of us. There's a small gap in between both beds. I'm unfortunately on the outside of the bed, next to the gap. My sister wakes me up and she keeps saying to look at the end of the beds. I've never been more scared in my life. It was one of those cat-in-the-hat dolls with a pulled bow tie. It was literally walking toward us, radiated pure evil. And keep in mind, it was purely cotton or whatever material had stuffed inside, but it was definitely not a toy that could move by itself. Thought I was just dreaming at the time. So I'm laying super still when the doll walks past my parents' bed and to the end of our bed, peeked its head around the corner and then started moving really fast toward me. We both scream at the top of our lungs, jump to our parents' bed, and my parents both wake up and my dad is super pissed. My mom recalls to this day waking up to that creepy cat-in-the-hat doll, seeing it standing and moving its head. She said as soon as she looked at it, it fell limp to the floor. My dad never believed us, but my mom witnessed it. 3 people all witnessed the exact same thing. Evil presence at a sleepover. This story takes place in 2017. It isn't a very eventful story as far as paranormal encounters go, but I personally find those to be the most believable. I actually created an account just to share this, and I've written it all down. My then best friend, I'll call her Lex, and I were having a sleepover at my dad's house. I was 16 at the time, and her being 17. We often had sleepovers on Fridays where we would eat junk food, watch as much Netflix as possible, and have deep conversations. This night was no different, and so unremarkable that I've forgotten everything we did. That is, of course, until we were trying to fall asleep in my bed. I remember being completely exhausted, slowly but surely drifting off despite sharing a bed with someone. I was just on the brink of sleep when Lex got my attention. First, she simply asked if I was awake. I grunted in response, signaling her to continue. It should be said that I was quite literally a minute or 2 away from unconsciousness, so I didn't pick up on her tone of voice or think much of what she said next. "I'm going to use the bathroom downstairs," she told me, getting off the bed. This wasn't normal, her announcing that she would be slipping away to use the restroom, but I was just too out of it to be annoyed or curious. What's wrong with her using the bathroom? Not long after she left, probably no more than 10 seconds, it started happening. And again, I was on the precipice of sleep, so my mind wasn't racing with thoughts or in any state of freaking myself out. Nevertheless, I became filled with the feeling of impending danger out of absolutely nowhere. I was becoming very lucid very quickly as dread and anxiety overwhelmed me. I'd never felt this kind of acute fear before, nor seemingly out of nowhere. Now, wide awake, I opened my eyes and I stared at the wall less than a foot away from my face. As I slept facing away from the bedroom door, mind you, so my heart raced as I tried to understand the situation, but I didn't move. Something told me that moving would be a very bad idea. My room was pitch black, so that didn't help matters. All I could think about was how scared I was and how I hoped Lex would return soon. I can guess that a few minutes pass like this when suddenly the bed dips on the side I'm not occupying, as if somebody was getting onto it. Problem was, not only did Lex struggle to get onto my bed due to its height, but my bedroom door never opened. At this point, I was terrified. I only became more afraid as I felt something against the back of my body. It felt like a person just gently pressed against me. Thought to myself hysterically that there was no way this was actually happening. I held my breath to better isolate the feeling, horrified to feel the presence moving as if I was breathing, or rather as if it was breathing too. In and out pressed against me, in and out. The atmosphere is still suffocating in the room, filled with what I can only describe as evilness. The aura of whatever was touching me screamed danger, don't move, I'll hurt you. My mind and heart are racing as I try to think of a way out of this. The only balm I have to lessen my anxiety is the fact that I know Lex will eventually return. But what happens then? She wouldn't see whatever it was pressed against me, at least when she entered the bedroom to occupy with this, making sure she wasn't disturbing my sleep, so I told myself that once I heard the door open, I would address her, ask her to turn on the lights. After what I would come to find out was about half an hour, Lex finally did return. The second I heard the door open, the light flooded into the bedroom, called her name. She hesitated, her soft voice saying, "Yes?" I requested bluntly, "Turn on the lights." She did as I asked. I shot like a bullet from my previous position, whipping around to inspect the area I felt the presence. It was nothing. I wouldn't notice right away, but later I realized that the horrifying aura that was plaguing my bedroom had vanished once Lex arrived. It was gone just as suddenly as it appeared. Still, I was in a state of horror for the next few hours. We watched some cartoons together and decided to sleep with the lights on, but not before talking about what just happened. Lex revealed to me the reason she had gone downstairs wasn't to use the restroom, but to call her boyfriend for emotional support. She told me that she felt panicked. She wanted to leave the room to escape from the stifling feeling. Lex couldn't get a hold of him and spent the next 30 minutes or so trying to calm herself down. In the morning, Lex and I would confide in my dad, the only other person in the house. He was rightly disturbed and told us that he had a nightmare that night. I can't quite remember what that nightmare consisted of, only that it was a really bad one. My dad's a vet, so he's not easily spooked, and that's not the animal kind. But it left him uneasy. The fact my dad had a nightmare at all made this whole experience more notable to me. And to wrap things up, I want to say that I had improperly used a spirit board a few years before this, also with a few of my friends at my dad's house. We were all children, so we didn't take it any more seriously than any other Halloween game. Nothing of this magnitude occurred before, though. Just this one night. Lex and I were able to acquire holy water from one of the teachers at our high school, and after she told him the story, we used it to cleanse my whole bedroom. Nothing strange has happened to me or my dad since. Whatever was at my home has followed me to my mother's house. I'm currently going through a divorce, and about 2 months ago I voluntarily left my home to my soon-to-be ex-wife and our 3 kids. That was until we had come to an agreement on a living situation. She doesn't have family in our state, and I do. We had many things happen over there. Shadows dashing in the hall, phantom voices coming from rooms no one was in, and even a shadow of what looked like a little girl jumping out of the bed in the middle of the night. These occurred on a weekly basis. I even had 3 paranormal investigators go to my home, and we all saw the little girl dart behind the island in the kitchen. Here at my mom's, I stay in my childhood bedroom that's adjacent to the bathroom with the barn door. The barn door doesn't roll. A few times at night from the corner of my eye, I could see something moving back and forth in the bathroom. Got to the point where I just set up a curtain so I didn't have to see in there. My sister, who also lives with my mother, has 2 small dogs. At times, they both tense up and stare at absolutely nothing and begin to bark. One night, we were watching TV in the living room and they both jumped off the couch and seemed to be following someone who wasn't there. They go into a bedroom. We hear a small bang and they start barking and run back to the couch. My mom wrote it off as them following a fly, and I think it was different. Last night I went to bed around 10. I'm a light sleeper, so I heard commotion around 3:30 in the bathroom and woke up. I figured it was one of the dogs playing in the bathroom as they have free reign of the house. Well, when they're making noise, we just call out their names and they run out of the room. I did this 3 times and they never came out. In the 4th call out, my sister who sleeps down the hall yells out, "They're here in my bed." I feel my body turn white and I just stared at the curtain. There's still commotion in the bathroom, but I clearly heard someone pacing barefoot on the tile floor. Out of nowhere it stops and I just wait for somebody to come out until 7 a.m. where the sun starts to brighten the room and I fall back asleep. Story time. True. When I was in middle school, I was 11. Came home from checking my grades online at my friend's house. When I entered my house, I noticed my family was gathered in the living room. Odd. So I decided to see what was going on. So it happens that my dad found some old doll in our garage. Mind you, my dad went to yard and garage sales a lot, but always bring me Barbies and stuff to play with. Well, let me tell you, everybody in that room denied ever seeing the hideous thing. I would have known, but I've never seen it. Here's her description. This fucking doll was like 4 foot something with hideous 80s clothing and had a damn mullet. Okay, so we were all like, fuck that, and threw it in the garage again so my grandma could take it to some kid in Mexico. Well, when the time came for my grandma to go, we live in Colorado and she was on her way to Mexico. She was in New Mexico and she got in a bad car accident. She fucked up her spine. And everything that they had was either lost, damaged, or in some bags. That goddamn doll was 100% okay. I brought the damn thing back and my grandma was on bed rest for a solid 3 months. She said she would hear footsteps at night, and I would too. When my brother and I were watching TV, our blender would turn on and our TV would go out. This happened more than once, by the way. Well, one day I was pissed. I got the doll and I went to throw it away at our local park. Dumb choice, I know. Our house wasn't rid of paranormal shit. One night I precisely went to bed at 11:15 and woke up at around 1 a.m. feeling dizzy and sick as hell. I was sweating so bad, felt everything just turning, and something choked me so hard I lost my breath, but let go. I sat up and I remember yelling so loud for so long because nobody could hear me. I felt the floorboards moving under me and I couldn't get up. Finally, my brother heard and tried to open the door and it was locked. I never lock my doors, by the way. Especially then. It took him like 5 minutes till he could get inside and he said my face was so white it looked like I was dead. Well, my mom was like, "What the fuck's going on?" I told her. She freaked out and, well, the next day she took me to a healer to cleanse my hand. Healer's advice. Because I had touched something that someone my age shouldn't have handled. She knew there was some negative shit on that doll and forbid me to go to the park where I threw it, because it could mean something really bad would happen. Well, my dumbass went to the park like half a year after and there was no doll. I was swinging with my friend when he saw over the lake that there it fucking was. Its head out was looking dead straight at us. Fuck that. That year we lost our house and had to relocate. Started having bad suicidal thoughts after that. I've always wondered if that thing latched onto me, if that's why I always saw a bunch of crap. I just wanted to share this with the world. Maybe it's not like Chucky, but possessed dolls are a real deal. Story. I had an encounter with a shadow person out of the blue. Literally the most randomest of times. I swear, it made me crazy. I was talking with a friend of mine when I looked out the window and saw a black, faceless figure looking at me from behind my tree. I remember I blinked like 5 times. It wouldn't disappear, so I freaked the fuck out and yelled at my friend to hurry up and close my curtain. I was in shock. She freaked. I didn't look outside after that. I don't know what happened. What I do know is the months following, I was in just a very depressed state. I couldn't really eat or do anything but cry. I couldn't sleep at night until 5 a.m. when the sun would start to come up. One night I smoked a blunt. I had a big frame with the Virgin Mary sometime after midnight, and I looked at it with her eyes and they were rolling around. That whole 6-month period felt like hell. I heard footsteps in my hall at night that would run rapidly, then they would stop and then start again. I'd always get the feeling somebody was there. When I saw the shadow, it didn't have a face, but I felt the intensity of it like a watch. It's like it stayed engraved in me. Well, I was getting worse and worse, skinnier and skinnier. My mom called in a curandera over to our house, my neighbor. She did this weird-ass thing with a Bible, some alcohol, and a plant. We prayed for a solid 30 minutes and she rubbed some alcohol on my head, literally the top of my head. She said that my soul wasn't in my body, needed to find me again. When we get scared, it leaves through the top of my head, and, well, she said that it felt like I was being watched because I was trying to come back but couldn't. Needless to say, that night as soon as she left, I knocked the fuck out. I hadn't gotten sleep like that in all for months, and I started dreaming again. At least being able to remember them again. I gained my appetite, and I don't think I'm being watched. Still we hear footsteps, but it's not at all the same feeling. Just wanted to share a story with y'all. 100% true. Do you have any similar experiences? Premonition. I don't know if this is the right place for this, but it's fairly weird. I'm new to this, so bear with me. Alright. About 2 weeks ago on Thursday, 7:25, that night I had a dream. Can't really make anything of it now, but I remember very clear images still. I woke up and I was like, WTF? See, I censored myself. Or I censored them. I remember seeing somebody inside. A body, not specific, dead. Looks to have drowned, lying face down on some rocks. I don't remember anything else. I don't know if I dreamt up a scenario, I don't know. Well, when I have dreams like that, it's always very emotional. Got a very big headache specifically on the right side of my head. Went about my day. I'm a barista. Went to work. I was cleaning some tables and I saw a newspaper. Holy expletive. The dead body was right expletive there. It was on print, my dream, reality. I was losing my expletive. When I got home, I sat down. Okay. I thought, who the f was that? But some weeks a former student at my high school had gone missing. I graduated in 17. I had no idea what could have happened or who he interacted with. I busted out my map. I pinned his last reported point of location where he disappeared and last seen, versus where the body was found. I came to a conclusion that it was him. There is 100% possible chance his body floated 2 miles away in the river. The reason I went all FBI mode was because the dream and the body wasn't recognizable. I was going to take days to be able to ID kid disappeared May. The reason why his body's unrecognizable, possibly. Well, what really caught my attention was a Facebook post where he posted that somebody was following him in February. Could it have something to do? I don't know. I suspect foul play. The reason I write here is because, nowadays later the body was identified as the missing student, but the cause of death is unknown. I believe this individual's soul reached out to me and was trying to tell me something. I think somebody hit him on the side of his head, hence my headache and symbolism. Also, I'll note all my life I've been experiencing paranormal weird phenomena. This is not the only thing I want to document here. But yes, thoughts. Please tell me I'm not cray-cray. Does that mean crazy? Am I that old? Maybe this has happened to somebody else. I was debating even posting this because 1, I never knew him, and 2, could be suspect, and 3, it's an overall weird thing to even talk about. But I know I'm not guilty of anything and genuinely believe that a spirit tried to contact me. I'm fairly new to the spiritual world, and I know I can communicate through scrying, but should I? Sounds cray-cray to me. Toddler talking to people who are not there at night. So I know this thread is full of made-up scary stories and such. Not all of them. I know there's probably also posts much like my own here now, true or not. I'm only posting this here because this is a very active thread and I'm looking for opinions. I also am not really sure what to tag this with. I'm not very active on Reddit. My toddler 2 years old sleeps in his own room on the other side of the house in his crib. On 2 occasions now, we've heard him talking to somebody through the baby monitor that we keep in his room. The first time was back around August. We heard him talking and figured it was just him talking to himself as toddlers do. We paid it no attention and we were falling asleep until we heard a clear, distinct, "Hey!" The voice sounded like a grown man, but youthful and cheery. Me and my girlfriend both heard it and sat up at the same time. I grabbed my pistol and immediately headed to his room to inspect. Nope, no one was there. I checked the surrounding rooms to find the same. My toddler was wide awake and seemed fine and happy. We were trying to come up with a solution to what we had heard, but we thought maybe it was one of his toys, yet none of them are within reach or motion activated. Lord knows he has plenty of those that talk. But none of them have a voice that says, "Hey." And though not with the voice that we heard or without playing music or talking more than just that. We searched the web as people do. Thought maybe the monitor was picking up a radio signal from a nearby station. Maybe even an emergency police or fire scanner. We still could be possible, but it seems too clear in just the one word with nothing else and not even a touch of static or interference. Who knows? We forgot mostly about it in the following weeks. Tonight, just an hour ago, my girlfriend and I were laying down for bed. I got up to use the bathroom moments later and our toddler started calling for Dada over the monitor. I mostly just smiled and continued to the bathroom until he said, "Can you hear me?" In a kind of confused, questioning tone. The kind he used when he's repeating something that you've said to him for the first time. Made me pause. Never said those words or even heard that phrase to my knowledge. My girlfriend turned up the volume on the monitor, confused too. I was standing in the bathroom door and she was laying on the bed holding the baby monitor to her ear and began saying that she could hear whispering. Whispering while her toddler was still calling loudly for Dada. Again, I grabbed my pistol and inspected. Girlfriend followed close behind. Again, the same story. No one in his room or anybody else in the house. He seemed fine and happy standing in his crib. We asked him who he was talking to several times and no real answer other than him giggling and saying, "Hey mama, hey Dada." I went to the bathroom as I was going before. While in there, I heard our toddler say "Tony" to my girlfriend. She said he had put his finger to his lips like he was telling her to shush when he said it. He's never done that before. Tony was his great uncle who died years before his birth and before me and my girlfriend even got together. His house used to be right beside where our current one is. I say our house, but we live in a trailer, which is only 2 years old, and we moved here 2 years ago. We don't talk about Tony. I wouldn't have much to say, being as how I've never met him. He passed away in the hospital, but I've heard the stories of spirits sticking to the land or the house they lived in. Also the stories of children seeing people who've passed away. Has anybody else experienced this sort of thing with their children, and is it something I should be concerned about? The Screaming Drain. One night as I was laying in bed, I suddenly heard a strange noise coming from my bathroom. It sounded like a distant scream, but I knew I was alone in the house. I tried to ignore it at first, but the noise persisted and grew louder. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. I reluctantly got out of bed and made my way to the bathroom. My heart was racing with fear. As I reached the door, the screaming grew louder and even more intense. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what I would find on the other side. But I knew I had to investigate. I slowly pushed the door open and peered inside. To my surprise, the source of the noise was the drain in the shower. It was making a horrific high-pitched shrieking sound. I stood there, frozen in shock, as the noise continued to fill the room. I didn't know what to do. After a few moments, the noise suddenly stopped. The silence was almost as unsettling as the screaming had been. Cue awkward silence. Yeah, that's enough. I cautiously stepped into the bathroom, but there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. The drain was just a normal drain and the bathroom was empty. I still don't know what caused the drain to make that noise, but I never heard it again. To this day, the memory of that night still haunts me. Weird experience during camping trip. One day I was going on a camping trip with friends. The day went on regularly. Forecast said sunny day and a cold night. This was around the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. We were just doing regular camping things, lighting a fire, roasting some hot dogs, telling stories. Time comes to go into a little hut that we built by hand through the years. The campfire was basically completely extinguished by that point. We go in and go into our sleeping bags, ready to tell stories till we go to sleep. Unfortunately, the hike to the campsite's very rough. I lost one of my underlayers of clothing, so I was colder than usual. How do you lose an underlayer? So all my friends went to sleep successfully. I was just waiting to do so as well, until a singing light that made up the campsite bright as day went up. I didn't look directly at it as I was laying down, but I saw the very bright light through the windows of the hut that we made. It was very sudden. It was coming from like a since extinguished fire even. I got up to take a look at it, and it looked like there was a person next to the campfire. Woke up my friends, and I confirmed that I wasn't just being delirious due to hunger and sleeplessness. They confirmed that what I saw was what I saw. But before long, the singing light and almost daylight lighting around us was gone. I know that something fires really light after a bit, but this was no regular fire. This was magnesium-type singing flame, but on a massive scale. To make it worse, the coldish yet dry night forecast suddenly turned into a horrid hailstorm. There was hail as big as half a human fist. As big. Thankfully, we built a hut to withstand such conditions. But it was still horrifying. This next part, I don't really know if it's factual or just my delirium. My friends went back to sleep, but during the hailstorm, mind you, it was pretty aggressive. It muted nearly any other sound, with its bumps on the roof and its white noise. I could hear footsteps on the wet leaves right beside our hut. That was under the extended part of the roof. This, however, could have been an animal or delirious hallucination of mine. We haven't spoken about this ever again from that day. Talked about it to my father, but he just played it off as just a fire relighting and me being scared. This happened more than a year ago. I am to this day very perplexed and traumatized by this experience. I really want any kind of explanation for it, preferably non-paranormal. You're in the wrong place for that. But any kind of information will help me. I've sleepwalked, seen and heard demonic spirits, out-of-body experience, and body scratches. I've experienced so much spiritual paranormal stuff in my life. Younger years. Sleepwalked out of my bedroom and into the den in the middle of the night, and I could see my mom. Something that made itself look like my mom at the kitchen table with the candle lit in front of her, looking dead ahead. No movement, no nothing. I snapped out of it, and I was so freaked out that I couldn't go back to sleep alone, really. Next case was I was sleeping in bed, and I was in the middle of a dream where I was watching baseball or hearing a baseball crowd. I could feel 2 fingers walking across my shoulder or arm, like when your fingers used to make like a person walking or a spider. Woke fully up and there was nobody there. Midday nap. Definitely not part of my dream. College era. Saw about 3 paranormal demonic entities on separate occasions. One was kneeled down next to my bed that resembled a woman I was in college with, except she had shiny glossy face, almost like a porcelain doll. It was murmuring something, but eventually, luckily, disappeared. The second one resembled my grandmother with her back turned and then turned to face me. The third one was a shadow person about halfway through the floor in the front of the closet in the middle of the night, and it was rather dark. It was darker than a shadow could be in the darkness of my room. I could even make out the body shape in a wide-brimmed hat. Years later, started getting bloody scratches on my back and shoulders that were like 3 or 4 claw marks that were kind of bleeding. They would even burn when they started to appear. Much of the time I was awakened during the day or morning or evening even, not even touching that part of my body when it would appear. That kept on for years here and there. More recent years. Hearing my name being called, hearing demonic voices wheeze laughing, or just saying things. Saw a serpent-like angelic being watching over me that looked like it was thousands of years old. It had someone with a deep voice trying to comfort me. And it was me. Even knew my name and placed their hand on my shoulder. Saw myself trying to get back into my body laying on the couch coming from behind my head after the spirit was being chased by some demonic entity in this alternate shadowy dimly lit dimension. It was a dimension of my own same apartment as I was asleep. Also recorded footage of banging and stuff going on in the kitchen. And I was asleep and an audible voice saying hey near the phone camera. And a visible distortion in the video when that happened. Also sleepwalked into my bathroom, drew an image of patterns all over the mirror using water from the faucet. I didn't know I had done it until I woke up the next morning. I saw an image of an African-American homeless man dancing in front of me one night when I woke up suddenly. So yeah, been through some stuff. Weird stuff. Sleep paralysis, forced out of my body, maybe astral projecting. I have quite a few experiences with sleep paralysis, starting when I was around 14. At the time, there were other disturbing paranormal experiences happening in my home around me specifically. The dreams vary, but the common occurrence is I'm out of my body and I can see my physical body asleep in bed. But I'm either being held back or being dragged away from my physical body when all I'm trying to do is get back into it. This always has a dark and evil feeling to it too, but I've never really seen anything else there. This has been reoccurring periodically since I was 14. Normally when I'm in a very weak and emotional psychological state. I'm now 26, by the way. Lately I've been having experiences similar to these other things, but slightly different. The best way I can describe it is it's like I'm lucid dreaming, but not really. I don't really have control over the dream and what I'm doing, but it's like I'm conscious and I know I'm dreaming. I know it's a bad dream and that the same feeling as my sleep paralysis experiences. I know I need to wake up and kind of just feel like I'm in danger. Try hard to wake up, and after persisting, usually I can force myself to wake up by trying to scream. For this next part, I should include my stepmom considers herself a spiritual person. When I had the first experience, she taught me how to protect myself, praying, using a certain phrase, asking for protection and imagining a white light around myself. I'm skeptical of this working, but it gives me some peace of mind, so I do it. Last night I had a dream, and like I described, I could tell I was dreaming. The dream wasn't anything too bad or good, it was just random, but it had a dark and evil feeling to it. I knew I needed to wake up. I tried hard to wake up, but I couldn't. And while still asleep, I started saying my protection prayer and imagining the white light encasing myself. When I started my protection prayer, I felt something I'd never experienced. It felt like something pulling out of my body to the left of me. This scared me so badly I tried to move in the opposite direction and I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was in my room in my bed and I tried to get out of bed to the right of me, but couldn't move properly. I just kind of started to roll out of the bed and scream. This is when I woke up completely laying flat in bed. These experiences terrify me, make me feel like I'm very vulnerable and under attack. Has anyone experienced anything similar? Ask Reddit 1. I'll do the backstory first. Our rental home and a house across the street are the oldest on our block. I want to say both are built before 1910. My neighbors were two older Vietnam veterans. I'd always had paranormal experiences in their home, but nothing scary. Just odd things getting moved around and doors being slammed. Really loud noises. They would talk with the ghosts, apparently. The guy who actually owned the house died of cancer, and his best friend was forced to move because he couldn't afford to buy it, sadly. The owner's asshole kids sold it to a developer and they tore the place down. My renter works from home, which is across the street from the torn down one. He has her desk right next to the front door. So for several months after the house was torn down, she'd be working and the front door would be closed. They would clearly be able to hear the outside door that went into the sunroom being opened and somebody walking. Her dog would be a little on edge and do a little bark. Nobody was ever there, so we decided the ghosts from the Vietnam veterans' house temporarily moved over to our rental house before actually passing on. We're all friends with the best friend of the owner, so we told him what had happened. He said that must be what was going on. Well, we all thought it was really cool, and I truly hope the new ugly monstrosity that was built in this place is haunted, because they probably pissed off the spirits that lived on there. Our rental home also seems to have been haunted because when my parents bought the place in the early 90s, my mom had one of those walk-through, randomly freezing parts of the room, and it would smell of cigar smoke. Experiences like that, but it only happened the one time. Ask Reddit 2. I'm from a big family, and we're from a small town and country area. A farming family, somewhat relevant. Well, I had two great-grandmothers as a child. My great-great-grandmother on my father's side was called Grammy. Grammy lived in the house her late husband had built for her many decades earlier. Grammy was an incredible woman. Independent until the day she died at 104 years of age. She made her own wine from berries that she grew and picked, and she said that wine was the key to a long life. She also said things like, I used to listen to the wolves as a kid before they were exterminated in this area. You'll hear them here and again by the time you're an adult. I just know it. I've seen it. Crazy thing is, she was right. She was, well, right about a lot of that sort of stuff. That's not the weird part. Grammy and my great-grandmother, her daughter, claimed, not publicly, but to family, to be able to talk to spirits. Most people in the family brushed this off, but they would know things that seemed to be impossible to know unless they'd talk to a person. This was pre-internet, so it really caught people off guard. So now to the weird stuff. Grammy ended up in the nursing home due to a double hip break. She really took a turn for the worse that week. I was still pretty young, but I remember my dad had worked ridiculously long hours, spending all his time he would have slept, keeping her company instead. One night he came home and he said Grammy was in good spirits. I went like a short while later, and now I've always dreamed incredibly real lucid dreams, but that night I dreamed I was outside riding big wheels with my sister. Bonus points if you remember big wheels. Bonus points received. My dad's truck pulled into a very long country driveway at a very high rate of speed. He was beyond upset. He was saying Grammy had passed away just after the night before, the night before he left. I woke up feeling so confused. It seemed so real. Later that day, my sister asked me to ride big wheels, and all of a sudden my dad's truck pulls in, coming in hot. He jumped out of the truck, and I could tell that he'd been crying, something he just didn't do. He called us inside. Shortly later, he explained Grammy had passed away, and I spoke up saying, "Well, just after you left last night, right?" My dad looked like he'd seen a ghost. Couldn't understand how a small child knew that or would even guess that. Well, to this day, I've never told him about the dream. The thing is, my dream matched word for what my dad said up to the point I said something. So weird. A week later, the family was going through the house. I'd lived writing at a young age, or probably she loved. My brother had gone down to the old basement to see a desk that my grandma used to write at. I went down there to find him, but all I saw through the dusty light provided by the small window was the desk. Half the room was lit poorly, the other half darker than night. As I was wondering where my brother was, a small toy tractor rolled out from the darkness. I recoiled in fear and said my brother's name, and that's not funny. From the top of the stairs, I heard my brother ask, "What's not funny?" I ran, and I never entered that house again. Years later, I was 17. My great-grandfather, my dad's mother's father, was dying in a horrible, painful death due to extensive cancer. I went to see him one night. He was no longer able to really talk, but everyone was hugging him, telling him that they loved him, and he was getting worse. When I hugged him, I said, "I love you, Grandpa." And he whispered in my ear, "I love you too." It sent chills down my spine as I couldn't even remember his wife's name. I turned so white. People asked if I needed to sit down. I just left. I couldn't understand what just happened. That night I dreamt of he and I sitting in my grandparents' house like we always did for get-togethers. He looked at me from his chair and said, "You know I'm dying, right?" I said, "No, Grandpa, the treatment worked. You'll be fine." He said, "No, I'm dying as we speak." I woke up and I was just sweating in bed. It was around 2 a.m. and that morning my dad wasn't gone for work. He was home. It wasn't normal. I was eating cereal at the dinner table when he walked up and grabbed my shoulder from behind. I glanced up and his face said everything. He looked down at me and said in a breaking voice, "He's gone. He passed about 2 a.m. Broke my heart. Over the next 2 years, my great-grandmother, Grammy's daughter, began to go downhill. I tried to visit when I could, but I lived almost 2 hours away. I remember the last time I saw her, I walked into the house expecting to see her in the kitchen. I could hear her talking to somebody. It sounded like 2 distinctly different voices. One I recognized being my great-grandmother, and the other I couldn't place. I didn't see any other cars in her driveway, so I was super confused. I called out, "Hey, Grandma." She said, "Come on in, I'm just talking to a friend." Confused, I walked into the living room and saw only my grandmother. No TV was on, no radio, just her in her chair with a smile on her face. So we began to talk, and I said, "You must have been watching TV or on the phone when I got here." "No, I was just talking to an old friend. I do that these days. I get lonely here, and so they visit." I kinda shook it off and went to her basement to grab something. As I was down there, I clearly heard her say, "Yeah, that's my grandson. He's so nice to visit. He's downstairs." Then I got the chills as I heard what clearly sounded like somebody walking down the stairs, but no one was there. That's when my grandma heard her daughter explain that she and Grammy claimed to talk to spirits. I had seen and experienced enough weirdness over the years to start to believe it. A few months later, I had one of those dreams, and this time it was my great-grandma, back in her living room, but this time I was walking to the living room and I saw them. I saw the people she was talking to. They all seemed so happy. No one seemed to even acknowledge me being there. They were saying that they were so happy to see her again, and it freaked me out. The next day, I got a call from my dad. I could tell he was shaky. He said, "Great-grandma passed away." I asked how. She was a larger woman, and she was getting an EMS-assisted lift to go to the hospital, and, well, they dropped her. Her heart stopped, and they couldn't get her to come back. It was a horrible accident, but it was her time. It clicked in my head that the reason that she could see them in the dream was because she was also dead. They were no longer voices of old friends, but they were really there. And thinking about it still makes me feel weird. See ya.